Live.
Thank you. Good evening. This is the Planning Committee, Tuesday, the 28th of February, 2023. Welcome, councillors, officers, those watching at home and esteemed members of the press here tonight, not to mention the public. I think we got a little bit of sound effects at the moment, I think. Okay, have we got any apologies for tonight? Councillor Sweeney.
Councillor Fear, and I'm subbing for him, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're all here. Other than that, no other apologies. We can move on to the next item, declarations of interest. Are the members here tonight got any declarations of interest they wish to make on the agenda tonight? I cannot see any indications that that's the case, so I'll move on to the next item, minutes of the previous meeting. Are we all content to accept the minutes of the previous meeting? Have I got a proposer for that? Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. I'll second that from the chair. Thank you. Brings timely on to application item 4, application for major development, Madeley Manor Nursing Home. I believe we've got officers to introduce that one. Thank you.
So members will or may remember that considered an application back at your meeting on the 6th of December for Madeley Manor Nursing Home. There are actually 2 applications, one for planning permission and one for listed building consent for the conversion of Madeley Manor into 12 apartments and 2 houses. Members resolved to permit both applications and the listed building decision has since been issued. This is the full planning application which we're bringing back before you, and the reason for that is it relates to section 106 requirement on the previous recommendation and resolution. So in relation to the planning application, the developer is required to provide 25% affordable housing. But financial information is being provided demonstrating that the development cannot support any affordable housing. This has been independently assessed and accepted, and members accepted such a position at the previous meeting. Officers at that time considered it reasonable and necessary to require the financial assessment of the scheme to be reviewed if the development hasn't been substantially commenced within 18 months of planning permission being granted. And so for that reason, the previous recommendation included a requirement for the applicant to enter into a Section 106 agreement to secure a review of the viability position. However, following the meeting, the agent contacted us and highlighted an appeal decision relating to a site within our borough, New Farm in Audley, which was a development granted planning permission, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And in that case, the inspector concluded that a Section 106 would not be reasonable. The circumstances in that case are very similar to the nature of this site, and the time and investment likely to be required to get to the point where substantial commencement is achieved would introduce unnecessary uncertainty and cost for the applicant. So on the basis of that, officers are, and on further reflection, officers are of the view that this case does not pass the reasonableness test and any requirement for the Section 106 must be set aside. Now, I've put on the screen for you there, the relevant paragraph within the appeal decision. So as you can see there, the inspector assessed it and looked at the circumstances of the particular development, but also looked at the policy position and set out that planning practice guidance advises that viability assessments should be informed by current costs and values wherever possible. Acknowledged that there was no requirement set out within the relevant policies within the core spatial strategy. And so on the basis of that, considered that the application was acceptable without a requirement for viability to be reassessed at a later date. So on that basis, your officers are recommending approval of this scheme, but without a requirement for a Section 106 agreement to require the viability to be reassessed.
Bring it up to members for debate. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concerns is at page 20 on the public right-of-way officers report. The public right-of-way goes within a few yards, maybe 3-4 yards of the, or meters of the main building. So I'm just concerned that that public right-of-way is kept intact unless they put in for a change of route on that path. So I'd like the officer to just note that, please. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Just respond to that, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. Well, yes, they would have to keep that footpath in place unless they were to submit an application. But any issues such as this were considered at the previous committee and members have already resolved to grant planning permission. So really all we are looking at and all we should look at today is the issue of the Section 106.
Thank you, Chair. Can I seek clarity from our officers? This isn't a resubmission. This is the same application that this committee reached a decision on in December. And I'll be as gentle as I can. Instead of issuing a decision notice, our officers went away from that committee, were subjected to further pressure by the applicant, and are now recommending that we change our decision. Is that accurate? Is that what we're being asked to do tonight?
Put it in those words. We haven't issued a decision, but the resolution was to grant planning permission subject to a 106. So that process of putting together the Section 106 would have taken time anyway. So it's very unlikely that we would have issued a decision by this point anyway. But notwithstanding that, yes, the agent contacted us and provided that information. And we had to reflect upon that information. It is a material consideration, a previous appeal decision. So we have reflected and we are satisfied that the circumstances are directly comparable. And it's only on that basis that we've taken that appeal decision and the inspector's views on board. And we're
Councillors, can we have one meeting, please? Sorry.
And we're recommending that it's that this requirement is no longer within the recommendation. But I can also add that we have reflected on this generally, haven't we? And we are looking moving forward now to not require this on any subsequent planning applications where we think that the circumstances are comparable to what was set out in this one. We won't be requesting that reappraisal of the financial situation.
To our officer for the answer, which I completely accept, but I must say how incredibly disappointed I am. I've spoken before at this committee about ensuring that we as an authority secure what is owed to us from developers, both through financial contributions under Section 106 agreements and in terms of affordable housing provisions. Those things are things that our residents deserve. When there is development in our borough, we need those things to make applications acceptable? And for too long, we have permitted financial viability assessments by applicants to ride roughshod over that. And I accept fully, I have to accept that if us getting our fair share and the borough and its residents getting their fair share results in a project that's unviable, the law says we have to let it happen anyway. I would like us very firmly to try to the greatest extent to push back against what we're being asked to do here. I'm looking at the relevant paragraph of the appeal decision because it's still on our screen. It begins by saying, given the nature of the site and the time of investment likely to be required. Well, this is a different site. It's a totally different kind of application. This isn't, I mean, I'm not familiar with the new farm orderly application, but this is an application for the conversion of existing buildings into apartments. It is very possible that over a period of time, the financial viability of said conversion could well change. And we should be encouraging to the fullest extent developers to commence their developing as soon as we've granted permission, because we know that the borough needs more homes. We know that our economy benefits from that activity. And it doesn't seem to me unreasonable to say that after a fixed length of time, we would want in the future for those viability assessments to be redone, because in the event of the economic upturn that we all know is always just around the corner, if and when that happens, we want to be able to get our fair share. We're not asking for something extra. We're not asking for kickbacks. We're asking for something in terms of a financial contribution that is necessary to make development acceptable under our policy, under the planning policy framework. I really, really think that we should push back if we can, if not on this application, then certainly in the future. And I would not like to see our officers drop that policy of trying, whether it's 18 months, whether it's 2 years, at a fixed date in the future. If developers haven't gotten off their backsides and delivered what they say they will, then it is right and proper for us to reassess them. I really feel that, you know, whatever the decision we're looking at in front of us says, we really should be trying our utmost to be getting our fair share. Sorry, I've had a rant there, Chair.
Really, yeah, I do understand what you're saying about that. The wording of that appeal decision does say, given the nature of the site and the time and investment, etc. And that was why I made the point that, and it does say in the report that officers consider that the circumstances in this case are very similar, in that the nature of the site, which is a listed building that is in significant need of repair, with and is likely to, the nature of the site and the time and investment likely to be required to get to a point where substantial commencement is achieved would introduce unnecessary uncertainty and cost for the applicant. And it, so although I said that we would be looking to revisit our policy on these generally, we will be very careful in that we will be looking at the particular circumstances of each individual case.
Thank you, Chair. I assume that nod was I could speak. I entirely agree with Councillor Holland. I think the implications of this is that on the basis of this being raised by the applicant's agent, not only are we removing this condition from this application, but the authority you've already mentioned is considering removing that condition altogether. And I agree with everything Councillor Holland raised on the ensuring that we get the fair share and the sugar to go with the development. And I think that's incredibly critical. I think it's too, if the outcome of this successful appeal previously in Audley was of the nature that it would guide forward to remove that condition in going into applications, then it would have happened anyway. I'm sure the officers would have picked that up prior to the applicant raising this with us. So I guess what I'm saying is that if Councillor Holland is proposing, I would second him on that. I feel very strongly about the removal of this purely on the basis that it is comparable to a appeal decision. And I agree, the nature of the site, the time and investment, these are all huge variables, and it is difficult to draw a similarity between the two.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Williams. And Councillor Holland, any other members? Sorry.
I have a feeling that our officers are going to come back and advise us. What I think I heard from our officers is that having considered this application, the specific circumstances of this application are such that they don't feel we can sustain that 18-month review on the viability. So my question to our officers would be, is there a way that we can adjust that and make it reasonable and proportionate in the event that instead of going ahead and building what we told them they could build in December, they come back with a planning appeal, that we would be able to justify that? Would we be able to justify this if we set the clock running at 2 years rather than 18 months? Would we be able to justify it if we hedged it with other language? But I'd certainly be prepared to propose through you, Chair, a motion that our officers take what we've discussed here tonight as a very strong steer when we're looking at future applications, because we do want to push back on developers in this way. Perhaps they'll give us some advice on this particular application.
Okay, before I go to officers, I'll just take Councillor Moffat.
Thanks, Chair. Just supporting what other councillors have said this evening, we are constantly seeing these kinds of developments brought back to planning with variations which chip away consistently at things like Section 106. And I am worried that if this just goes ahead and is nodded through by us, that this development, this plan will come back again with more variations and more kind of pushing us into a corner of accepting things which really are not acceptable. And we're here on behalf of our communities, sitting in this planning committee, and I am really concerned that we're seeing it constantly, and I do not believe that this will be the only variation that this particular developer or agent will bring back before us.
Thank you, Councillor Moffat. Would officers like to respond?
Yeah,
please?
thank you. If I could come in, Chair, can I make it quite clear that we're not seeking any sort of dispensational favours for developers in coming back and removing Section 106 requirements? We are quite forceful with the need, and we will continue to be so. So we make sure that if there are any issues of viability, that's fully assessed. And in this case, it was assessed and it was done on an independent basis. The requirement that, shall I say, that you're using here in Newcastle, I've never come across this before. I've not seen many other areas, other authorities that use it. And I think in this case, what the inspector was saying in the appeal decision was that, well, the viability assessment is actually done at the time the application is made, and therefore the decision needs to be made on that basis. So that's where we need to get to. So we need to make sure that we robustly assess the information when we get the application, which we do. And also what's not said here is actually a planning consent is actually time bound anyway. So within a 3-year period, then if the application is not commenced, then that will be an opportunity then, if it's resubmitted, to actually then reevaluate that period. So coming to the point, you know, could we go to 2 years or whatever? I would suggest that we don't. I think, you know, we continue to come back to you on a case-by-case basis. And if viability is an issue, then that will be discussed with you as members before making a decision, so you are aware of the facts. I think in this case, the point that was made in dispensing with a 106 requirement, I think, for the affordable homes, was on the basis that it was a rest home before, and also the substantive works that was required to get the building back into a sensible state and a usable state, which was the reason that you consented to the planning application and also the list of building consent. And if you can recall back to the presentation, I think it was said that This site had been sort of mooted and been kicked around for a number of years. Nothing had happened, and it was getting into actually a poor state of repair. So there was real risk that the building was actually going to become a building at risk, which then does present a problem to us as a local authority in respect to the heritage. So we're not soft opening it with the developers. We do give them a hard time. So please, members, bear that in mind. And we will continue to be robust in our assessment of viability assessments in the future. Thank you.
For that, I'm inclined to agree with members on this. I don't wish to see the position where developers come back to this committee and use other decisions to basically get what they want once a decision's been formed. Councillor Holland, are you still wishing to proceed with your motion?
Disappointingly, I am. So we've already approved it. We've discussed the application. I appreciate what we've heard this evening. It does not seem to me to be unreasonable. And I hear from our officers that we've had, and I'm looking now at the paragraph that's been reproduced for us of that appeal decision. It does not strike down the idea of having a review mechanism for viability assessments after a fixed period of time. We're being invited to decide tonight whether we think it's reasonable to include that, and our officers' advice is that it's not. And I'm very, very hesitant to disagree with our officers, but we feel, hearing from other members, we feel very strongly about it. And other than the developer or their agent in this particular case doesn't think they're going to be able to make headway within 18 months, such as to meet the threshold of substantial development, I can't think of a reason why they're very upset with this review mechanism. The only thing that might persuade me to say that I don't want to push it in this case would be if officers could say to councillors tonight that there is very few conceivable circumstances ahead of us in which this development, given its peculiarities and the circumstances and the site, is ever going to meet a viability test. So if we apply a viability test tomorrow, it'll still fail. If we apply it in 18 months, it's still going to fail, not because the economy's not turned around, but because of what it is, because it's a conversion, because it used to be a care home. I mean, I would want our residents to know that we'd thought about that if I'm going to drop what I'm proposing. So will our officers say that? Would you, I'm putting up words in your mouth now, would you say that however further down the line we apply the viability test, it's extremely unlikely that this site is ever going to meet it?
That is absolutely the case. That I think it's a £2 million conversion cost of this building, given its particular condition and the nature of the building. So as far as we could possibly guarantee, I think, it is very, very unlikely that in any, whether it's 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, that there will be any difference in the conclusion of a viability assessment.
On that basis, I will not push it to a vote. I wonder if other members would like to, but I would abstain in those circumstances.
Councillor Jones, do you want to revisit this?
No, I same again, agree with Councillor Holland. I'm grateful to the officers for clarifying that, and that certainly helped crystallise in my mind.
So could I have any other proposals, please? Do you have a proposal to accept the conditions as printed? Do you have any other proposals? Councillor Sweeney.
Yeah, on the basis that if we don't let this go, we have a ruin on our hands, which I think is basically what the officers are saying, isn't it? 10, 20 years down the line, we have a festering pile of rubbish. I would move that we do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. I'll second that from the chair. Can I see a show of hands, please, to support that recommendation? It's clearly passed. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is item 5, printed on page 25, your pack. Land in the vicinity of Whitmore Road, Manor Road, Madeley, High Speed 2, HS2 Limited. Thank you. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So we've had several of these type of applications before the committee over the last 12 months. This is an application under Schedule 17 of the High Speed Rail Act 2021 for earthworks for the creation of an ecological mitigation pond and associated bunds along with 2 gates. So it's not a planning application as such, because Section 17 of the Act grants deemed planning permission, but puts in place a process for the approval of certain matters. And the developer has to seek approval for these matters from the relevant planning authority. So deemed planning permission has been granted by the Act, and therefore this request for approval under Schedule 17 isn't a planning application. So you see, I hope you can see that clearly. So running here north to south is Manor Road. It's at the Madeley end of Manor Road. So Madeley is the junction into Madeley is just off to the north of the screen. And what is proposed is this pond here and 2 bunds there and 2 gates, which you can just see there. So this is a typical section of the pond. So it's looking at a maximum depth of about 1 metre. And this is a typical section of the bunds that are proposed. So just to show you some photos, that's looking across Manor Road towards the site. So you can see that there's hedgerow, substantial hedgerows along the boundary. That's one of the gates that's already being put in place. That's an existing pond on the site. So if we just go back to that plan, you can see the existing, that's that pond that you could see. And that's the entrance into the site. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
That's now over to members for discussion and debate. Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Clean, it isn't a planning application. What is it? HS2 saying what's going to happen and we have to agree with it? Is that basically what this is? Just tell it for information purposes only or something?
For information purposes, but Schedule 17 of the Act sets out that certain things are have deemed planning permission, but it does also put in place a process for the approval of certain matters relating to the design. So that's what we're looking at here. And the schedule sets out that the council can only refuse to approve such an application or impose conditions in the following circumstances. And you'll see this in the agenda report. So it's where the design or external appearance ought to be modified to preserve the local environment, prevent impacts on road safety, or to preserve a site of archaeological or historic interest. So they are the 3 things that we're able to look at as part of this type of application. And you'll see those 3 issues are set out within the report, and in relation to each one, your officers are stating why it's considered that there isn't any impact.
Just come back on that comment. Any other members wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Just so I've got this right in my own mind and I know what I may or may not be voting on. This is replacement work, is it? This is replacement habitat and what have you for habitat that's been lost because of the railway construction.
Yes, that's correct, or that will be lost as part of the railway construction. So they're getting in place the ponds and the bunds to be able to mitigate that impact on the wildlife, really.
Rather, we didn't lose the wildlife and the habitat in the first place, Chair, but I guess that's not really a planning consideration.
To speak on this item? Okay, in which case I'll formally move then that we go with recommendations as printed. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Sweeney. Can I see a show of hands, please, that accept those recommendations as printed? Can I have a show of hands for those who are against? Can I see those who are abstaining? 1. Thank you very much. Correct point of order. Agenda item 4, I didn't ask for those votes against that application. Could I see those hands now, please? This is item 4. Any abstentions? I see 4. Thank you, Jeff. Moving on to our agenda item 6, is the land adjacent to Hoon Avenue and Mile House Lane, Newcastle-under-Lyme, Staffordshire County Council, and members will be very familiar with this, no doubt. Over to officers.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this application was considered at the last committee on the 30th of January. It was previously deferred. Members wanted some more information, which was presented to them at that last committee. The member resolution was in essentially 2 parts. Firstly, you resolved to refuse the application on grounds of loss of open space with particular reference to the green heritage aspect. And secondly, requested that officers come back to this committee with the appropriate wording to reflect this. So this is where we are now. So what you have before you, which is on your agenda sheet, your paper, this is an extract. This is the proposed reason for refusal. So you will see from there that is reflecting the loss of the open space relating to the green heritage, and therefore consider that there will be an impact. And the policy link or policy hook is based on a number of points. Firstly, policy CP4. And policy CP4 has 5 points, I believe, and we're looking at points 3 and 4. I'm happy to go into detail on those if members wish me to. And policy CSP5, again, points 3 and 4 at coincidence. So that relates to the core strategy back in 2006, 2026. The second element relates to the safe policy of the Newcastle-Lyme local plan, where specific reference is actually made to Hoon Avenue in that policy. And then just to bring it up to date, we need to make an assessment against current national policy. So there is relevant hooks in the national planning policy framework, which we believe we can refer to. So I'm just going to go back to those first points on policy CS4. So it's points 3 and 4 that we're looking at here. You can't see that very well, but it relates to the open space, so it is relevant. And what I'm saying here is that the other 3 points are not totally relevant, so we need to be very concise in terms of our reason for refusal. And similarly on the CSP5 points 3 and 5. The reference to policy N16, you will see there 8th bullet point down in the lower box, reference made to Hoon Avenue. So it talks about opportunities there, and we're losing that opportunity. So it refers to the green heritage. So we feel that we can actually weave that into the reason for refusal. So just to come back, Chair, that's the reasons that the reason with multiple components that we're suggesting members agree tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Nick. So the point has been established that we refuse. This is basically a discussion surrounding if are we prepared to accept these recommendations for the refusal wording itself. Over to you, members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The officers are you're both quite content with the response you've given, and there's no so I'm happy to move this. I don't see anything to discuss, and if the officers are happy and they're the experts and we're not, I'll be quite happy to move it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. I'll just open it up to the two members that have indicated, Councillor Holland and followed by Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I was not present for the discussion at the last meeting, so I will be abstaining on the resolution this evening, and I shall hold my tongue about the quality of decisions that you guys make when I'm not around.
You noted, Mr. Holland. Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Mr. Councillor. I thank the officer for the work they put in for this the refusal, and I must emphasise the point on the green heritage site, and that's local plan. It's down along the list is there. That includes, like I say, the Pearl Dam marshes and Woolstanton Marsh, very important areas in our green heritage of the borough. And the land in Newton Avenue is one of those. So really, I can't emphasise enough, and whether that's the officers must feel that's strong enough, really, to appeal to the if it does go to appeal to the planning officer. So I'll leave it at that. But just if we just go through, I've had one or two questions on the point of highways and flooding. I don't want to bring that back into the argument because it's too late. But the reason on that, for clarity, my view is that we've got with the consultees, highways, Staffordshire highways, give no opposition to this particular. So that's a dead end. We just can't get there. And on the flooding, Severn Trent and the Environment Agency put no objections and see that the developers have got that all sorted in that. So just for clarity on that point, make that point for people in our area, they're quite clear that that's the reasons why we didn't go down the route of on the flooding and highways, but stuck to this particular point on the green heritage sites. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Officers, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, Chairman. I think we had a fairly full debate on a number of the technical issues last time, and I can confirm that those statutory bodies raised no objections, but that did follow quite an extensive toing and froing with them between the applicant and them. The gestation of the application was nearly 2 years to resolve those issues and to get satisfactory answers, which was done. And therefore, on that basis, there's no technical reasons on drainage or highways that would stand up. Thank you, Chair.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Williams?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, in which case then we've had a formal proposal from Councillor Sweeney. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Williams. Can we see a show of hands supporting that recommendation, please? Thank you. Can I see those that are against? And lastly, can I see those that abstain? Thank you very much. To agenda item 7, land at Dodgespool, Betley. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is just an update that you've asked for. The last update, we said that we had approached the developer. There'd been no further activity, and following site visits, we did say that we'll be pressing ahead on breach of conditions notice, and that is now our intention. So we're proceeding with enforcement action to get this matter resolved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Nick. Are members content to receive this information and to bring it back in next but one planning committee? I see another hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 8 of the agenda. Emergency business. I haven't none. Do you have any emergency business? Emergency business? There is no emergency business. So members, that's the end of the planning committee for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. And I think there must have been a bit of a record in terms of conducting business tonight. So have a safe journey and I'll see you again. Thank you.